Welcome to Mac Football Forever. I'm Alex Alvarado. That's Caleb. We are equally surprised, I think, because we were not expecting Ball State to win by double digits. The win itself isn't the surprising part. It's just, holy crap. Ball State really beat Buffalo. Really beat Buffalo for the MAC title. And Ball State is your MAC champions for the first time since 96? 96?
I was just a wee lad last time that happened.
The MAC championship happened. Ball State won 38-28. Before we break down the whole thing, what is your just instant takeaway from everything that happened in Ford Field tonight?
You said it's not really a surprise Ball State won. I'm still kind of like, how did they look that much better? But in between talking about the end of this game, or what was going on in the fourth quarter and how it finished up, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking Mike New has outcoached Lance Leipold. You're talking about an older coach in Leipold who's been around the game a long time, has coached in really high-pressure games, high-profile games. Mike New straight up outcoached him. And Ball State rose to the occasion. A lot of guys on defense. We've got a lot of guys to talk about in terms of who made those plays. And nobody really stood out. It's like the prototypical championship team victory. You had turnovers in big moments, fourth down stops, game-changing plays. And all things said and done, nobody had any doubt about who the better team was at the end of the season. It's Ball State, no matter what Buffalo did the first 6 weeks of the season. Ball State was the better team at the end of the year, period.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I said last week that I think Ball State is, one of the more, if not the most complete team in the MAC. Not that I thought that it was the best team, but it just proved that, hey, it beat Buffalo, and therefore it is the best team. There's no disputing it from here. And for all the talk, over the past couple of years, how incredible it probably was that, Mike New's on the hot seat. Mike New's on the hot seat because he lost a few games. Ball State's a crappy job. It's a blah, blah, blah. It's a position no one wants to talk about, so I'm not going to give this article a lot of thought. He's on the hot seat.
We should find some other things that you can say in that voice, but I'll get back to you on that.
Mike New needs an extension. I know he just got one, I think, in the last, year and a half since Beth Getz got hired in as the athletic director, but don't lose Mike New. Keep him for as long as possible. That's a good program. And I kind of thought that we'd see most of the star play from Ball State if they were going to will their way to win, right? It was going to be from all the senior production because we had so many names to talk about. We had Drew Plitt. We had, the receivers like Davis and Hall and so on and so forth. Ty Evans is the guy? Is Jimmy Dahl a senior?
I don't know about Jimmy Dahl, to be completely honest with you, but let me run this by you. For everything about when you talk about a championship team,
Richard
and
Jr.
it's so stereotypical. What often comes up is who's the next man up mentality. And at the beginning, through 3 games, we were dead convinced that Caleb Huntley was not only Ball State's best player, but maybe one of the best players in the conference, period. But we're looking at a team that went without arguably, almost in all certainty, its best overall player. And they won a championship. They did not lose a game without losing him. They put a back in there who they didn't ask to be a world beater, and they just did what they were supposed to do. The defense stepped up in a way the last couple of weeks of the season that they've never done in years past. They've never strung together a couple straight games of late game defensive stops and game-changing turnovers like they did in this game. Some of those turnovers came at the end of the first half this time around, and then some fourth down stops came in the fourth quarter for Ball State. But it's just a team victory. It's a lot of upperclassmen and maybe some guys that might have to decide if they want to come back. But if you're Ball State and you have this winning mentality, there's not a lot of guys on this team. They're I'm going pro next year. This is a team that even without Plitt, I don't know much about their backups right now. They should still expect to have the pieces to come back and do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Jimmy Dawes, redshirt junior, by the way. I had to look that up. But yeah, you see today the pieces that should be coming back to be a difference later on. But I kind of want to point out what you said about the defense. They did show up. It kind of surprised me, but I guess not so much, that Buffalo, on average, outgained Ball State 7 yards per play versus Ball State's 5.4 yards per play. But Buffalo had a lot of big plays through the air, something that,
Yeah,
Buffalo didn't do a lot. The last time that happened was, Miami. But, it was
absolutely.
one of those things where, looking back at that game, and I think I said at the time that, it wasn't like Kyle Van Treese had a big day, absolutely, but it was because Miami let him have a big day. Ball State let Kyle Van Treese had a big day because they played 4-4 defense. They played a 4-4 stack against that run. That they said, we're not going to get beat on 26-5. If we're going to get beat, from 7, that's one thing, but we're not going to let the running backs do it. And they didn't. They didn't. They stuck to the bit. They forced Kyle Van Treese to win the game for 60 minutes, and that it just wasn't enough to get done. It
Yeah,
also it sucked to see Jaret Patterson go out for a little bit too. I got to throw that in there. But still, like, even with him in, Ball State did so much to shut him down and limited him to just 1 yard gains for the most part. It felt like at halftime he only had fewer than 50 yards. I was looking at the records saying, if he gets 100, was like 163, then he gets like the school record 200, he gets to 4,000 or something along those lines. Rachel Lindsay tweeted it out. But I was like, okay, let's see if we can get there in the third quarter. Nope. Nope.
yeah. I mean, early on, Buffalo did what you kind of expected them to do, running the football, and they still moved the ball after that because they had the play action game going. There was the touchdown that Van Treese threw to Trevor or to Wilson. I mean, the pocket's about as clean as it can possibly be. And at that point, I'm thinking, well, if they can't stop Patterson and if they can't like get any pressure whatsoever on Van Treese, how the hell do they compete? And the answer was, well, they just made Buffalo have to throw the ball. And to their credit, I mean, that Coach New and Ball State made it simple. If Buffalo was not going to abide by its run game, even while losing Patterson, if they weren't going to be committed to running the ball on 2 times every possession before a potential punt, then that works out in Ball State's favor every way. And I think earlier in the season, I mean, Ball State proved down the stretch as a team that they were the team that a lot of people said they weren't. Me specifically, I said Ball State is not the team that will create these game-changing plays. They're not the team that will get stops late in games. They're going to give up too many points in the end because their offense is as talented as it isn't going to win these late season games against like Toledo, against Western, against Buffalo. They're good, but they're not good enough to beat them. Screw what I had to say. But Ball State was like, F you, man. You don't know anything. Like, they don't give any craps about what I had to say about what their team was like. But if they were listening, they're like middle fingers up in the air. You don't know crap. We just won a MAC championship. We did everything everybody thought we weren't. And I don't normally like being I don't normally like being the guy where it's like, oh, we proved everybody wrong. But it does kind of feel that way.
No, but like that's really what they did, and like it's been going on over time, and like they deserved like every they deserved it when people were like kind of doubting them a little bit, like because they haven't proved it yet. They hadn't proved it in years,
Yeah.
and like we kept like going like, oh, Ball State's got this talent. Are they going to put it together? And here me over here like on this medium or like over on my podcast that I used to have, or when the blogging whatever I used to do, I kept telling you, stop, just don't buy into it. I fell for it so you don't have to. And I came into this year with the same material. It's like, I mean, I've never seen them put it together before. I've never seen them do it. All they had to do was put it together for a half season, which I haven't seen them do before, and they did. They did, and they showed up. Last week I said that they showed up for the hardest game of the year at the end of the year, and then they just did it again. Let me just quickly give the rundown of how the game progressed, though, and then we can kind of get back into riffing because we did a lot of riffing from the start. But I mean, we are lots of emotions, man. Lots of emotions. It's good stuff.
I'm sitting here drinking a Blue Moon, and I feel like I need to switch to a Red's Apple Ale because what am I even doing going blue at this point?
Buffalo started the game with the ball. They got on the ball. They got on the board first. Patterson had a little touchdown run, and everyone's like, let's get this going. Let's get it going. Ball State matched instantly to make it 7-7, and blah blah blah. They kept fighting back and forth. Jimmy Daw came through with a blocked field goal. Buffalo went for a field goal on its third drive, its second field goal attempt of the year. Got blocked by Jimmy Daw, whose name you will hear a lot today, apparently. Johannes Tyler, he had a touchdown grab to tie things up at 14. Kind of move things up forward a little bit closer to halftime. Ball State takes the lead 28-21. And that was the first time Buffalo had ever faced a deficit this year. And when you heard that, it was like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then you're like, well, I mean, they'll respond by just being awesome because that's what Buffalo is. But then again, we've never seen that before. How are they going to handle that? And then Jimmy Daw comes through with a sack and a forced fumble, and Christian Albright scoops it up for 34 yards. That's another score. Ball State's now up 35-21. And at that point, there's less than a minute till halftime. And I'm thinking, wait, doesn't Ball State get the ball to start the second half? I could see this. I could see this getting dicey real quick. And with 19 seconds to go, I'm sorry, go for it.
I was just saying, before we even get to that point, like I was starting to fire off a tweet like, Albright scoops and scores. What was so great about like the way that it's almost like you build your own luck. It felt like Ball State built its own luck this year, where they had possession of the ball in a tie game, 21-21. Plitt gets sacked and the ball comes out. They recover it, right? Good things happen to them. They score. Buffalo gets the ball, strip sack. The ball bounces directly into Albright's hands. He doesn't even have to bend down. It bounces straight to the ground on the strip sack, right into his waiting hands. He sprints into the end zone. That felt like, when I'm sitting there thinking in that moment, is like, by virtue of how they're playing at this time of the season, they've built their own luck. And that's exactly how I felt going into halftime, was everything's going their way, and it deserved to be going their way.
Yeah, like God exists and he loves Muncie.
He loves corn, baby.
To start up the second half, though, Buffalo's defense kind of forced Ball State into a few 3-and-outs. I think it was like 3 of the first 4 possessions at least. They came through. Jimmy Daw, though, he responds on defense. That guy is flying everywhere. Buffalo, they find themselves into some fourth down attempts on offense in the second half, and they're like, we don't want this to get blocked again. We're just going to keep going for it. And apparently every time Jimmy Daw just came through and tackled Kevin Marks in the backfield. Buffalo gets the ball eventually again, and Kevin Marks, who, we haven't heard from because we kept trusting Kyle Van Treese. He was 12 of 14 in the first half. But Kevin Marks, he peels off for a 67-yard touchdown run. And then the game it stays there at 10 points, at a 10-point difference, 38-28. That's like late in the third quarter. They really didn't score anything in the fourth? Man, lots of points in the fourth, but
right. And like they didn't even have to, because Jalen Thomas comes through with the big play on fourth down, because Albright is there for the scoop and score late in the first half. The defense did it. I mean, Bryce Crosby had a big pass breakup in the fourth quarter, a guy that Alex pointed out is one of the guys to look out for. We get to Antonio Phillips was a guy that I said needed to make a big play. He intercepts a deep ball that Van Treese did. And I said, if Ball State wins, Antonio Phillips probably makes a big play this time. So I'm celebrating that I was right about that, even if I was incredibly wrong about the final score in favor of Buffalo.
And neither one of us talked about Jimmy Daw, even though like his name came up in my head during the draft. I was like, we're not going to 14. Oh, but that fourth quarter is also kind of where we saw Lance Leipold kind of collapse a little bit more, because there was the one instance where Buffalo had crossed the 50, but they were what was it, like a 4th and 7, 4th and 5, 4th and medium of sorts, but like they were still like in Ball State territory. It was definitely on that far enough where you should go for it, but like kind of far enough from the first down marker where you're like, I don't know. So Buffalo's like, screw it, we're going to go for it. And then 5 seconds, 5 seconds left in the play clock, and Buffalo calls a timeout, burns their first timeout, and just decides to pooch punt it there.
Yeah.
I mean, you need those timeouts when you're down 10 in the fourth quarter as a team that's projected to win by 2 touchdowns. So, and it just, Yeah, I'll let you take over from here, but it just never.
Yeah.
I mean, it just never amounted to like any turnaround.
You're right. And at that point, as a coach, like, again, not a FBS football coach. That said, you take a timeout in that moment, it feels like you have to do it, even if you think the better move is to do the pooch punt. Like it's like you're conceding, and I hate the idea of conceding a big moment in a championship game.
Mm-hmm.
You can play it smart without basically throwing the white flag, a mini white flag moment there. And there were two moments in the fourth quarter where Buffalo was in fourth down when timeout was called. First time they did the pooch punt. The second time Ball State called the timeout, and Ball State came out and punted, and Buffalo came out and punted. And again, you could say in the moment that you thought that was the smart play. It was the numbers play. Like, this is what we need to do to win. But I guess I'm going to be the anti-analytics guy or the coach common sense guy. It just feels like they should have been going for it in that moment. They're the team that's supposed to be the team that's unstoppable offensively, and they just let it go.
Yeah, that's the kind of decision where you're like, okay, we burned the timeout, but we trust you guys on defense. We trust you to make the stop. But the defense hadn't, I did say that they made some plays in the backfield, and they did make some 3-and-outs, and that punt did get inside like the 5-yard line, I believe. It was very close to the end zone. It was a very good punt. But that was not the time or place to be saying that stuff. Like, at that point, you're like, Ty Evans hasn't had a negative rush all day. Like, they are getting some good pushes up front. We are making some plays, but we haven't made enough. Like you said, as soon as you make that timeout, even if you do believe that the punt's the right move, you have to go for it. For no other reason, honestly, because like it's crunch time and it's the championship game. Quite literally, like that's really why they should have gone for it. But yeah, that's essentially what happened. It just ended up being like a stalemate of punts in the fourth quarter. But it was still, it was still so incredibly fun to see. And I'm overall just surprised that Ball State was able to pull off the run game that it had against Buffalo. Like, Ball State established the run, therefore it won.
And they didn't have to do much, is the thing. And we didn't say they had to do much, because without Huntley, the one game just becomes a matter of, you take your chunks. You take your 4, you take your 5 or 6, you move forward. Alex pointed out early on, we were messaging during the game. There's the early play in the first half where it's a sure tackle for loss. Ty Evans keeps his feet moving. He finally rumbles down to the 1-yard line with 4 people on his back. Yeah. Next play on fourth down, Drew Plitt gets pushed into the end zone on the sneak for the touchdown. It's just simple stuff like that.
Yeah. To give you a little bit more context, that run was like a 3rd and goal, and they're about like 7 yards, like 6. No, they're about like 2 yards away. They're 2 yards away. But Ty Evans takes the handoff in the backfield. A couple Buffalo guys get around there. Ty Evans somehow runs away from what should have been a negative 5-yard rush to a 1-yard gain, which is exactly what I said in the preview. So thank you for subscribing and watching that if you are. And you have that play like that. And then the next play, Ball State hurry up, gets to the line, and it does one of the QB sneaks. The only reason why it was a touchdown is because the referees on the field called it a touchdown on the field.
Yeah.
But after review, that did not look like a touchdown.
No, and it did not.
And they came back and they said the play stood. No matter what they would have called there, if they would have called him short and if they would have called it a touchdown, they still would have went back and looked and reviewed, and they still would have came back and said whatever we said stood, because we have no idea.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so the only reason it was a touchdown is because a ref said, I guess.
Well, we can't prove it wasn't a touchdown. I don't know if this is the part where we can get back into riffing, but
it's all riffing at this point now.
I love a good riff. Even more riffs I love. We look at Mike New looking at Mike New coming back to his alma mater and bringing them their first championship in about 25 years. And there's so many like little stories here that I like about what Ball State was able to do. We've already talked about doing the little things and coming up with big plays late in games, being the team that fought against like the stereotypical aspect of, people didn't think we could do it, and we did. That Drew Plitt to me, was the quarterback who could put up the numbers but wasn't going to win games when it mattered, and he did. That we saw somebody like Johannes Tyler become somebody we didn't know anything about to maybe a NFL draftee in a year's time or so.
Yeah,
And
he's bona fide awesome.
Yeah. And then like guys on Ball State's defense go from being just, doubted to like, oh, they've got talent, to they make plays when it counts. And there's so many like little mini stories that I love about this team right now. And it makes me, even though I wasn't super into the idea of bowl season because of what we're facing right now, I want to see Ball State play another game. And Ball State might be the only team in the MAC I want to see play another game.
I would love to see Buffalo try to redeem itself here, though. But then again, I wouldn't want to have it. I wouldn't want to be wrong about it. I would hate to see Buffalo roll out another game and be like, all right, let's see how they redeem themselves. Oh, they lost by 10 again.
Yeah.
I
There's also some MAC teams that I think are capable of doing what NIU did against Boise a couple of years ago, where if they're really checked out mentally and they don't want to be there, it's just an unholy ass whooping.
That's not fair, man. Not every team has Rod Carey as a head coach.
Oof, so we both just shots fired. Okay.
Listen, there's no qualms about it. Rod Carey coached teams, during NIU, like his time at NIU, they just didn't get up for bowl games. Like there's no secret about it. Like go check that box score out.
Don't look at it. Don't look
it's
at
like
it.
The worst, like that's the worst box scoring point set of all history.
They outgained them, but okay, whatever. No, we're not getting into it. God, it was
let's focus on the good stuff, man. Ball State.
Yeah. So we were just like having just like goofy stuff on Twitter. Like I was enjoying seeing Danny Pinter's tweets, Willie Snead's tweets, and like Caleb Huntley didn't go to the game; he was home with family, and he was focused on the draft, getting healthy, and all that. And it's like it sucks that he wasn't there. It was funny. He was singing the school fight song afterwards on Twitter, and I was having a laugh at that, and watching all of the Ball State people who were so ridiculously hyped up about this game. I'm not going to say they were more hyped up than Buffalo people, but I will say that the support I saw on social media was rabid for this game, Ball State compared to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a year like this, like who knew that a Ball State MAC championship game would be the thing to give everybody joy?
I mean, we talked about from the beginning of the year. We kept, we threw out this idea, this talking point it's often tossed. Who knows what could happen? Anything could happen. And it felt more like that was the case this year because we just didn't know what was possible. Maybe some teams' games, all of their games get canceled. You don't know if it's going to happen. And this entire year has been up in the air any given week. And to the teams, the MAC West's credit, they didn't have to cancel any games.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Like in this kind of year, the teams that showed out, like they could not take any opportunity for granted. And like you hear from coaches like, oh, you never know when your last game's your last. Oh, you never imagine like, oh, what if I would have tried harder, in this respect or whatever. Maybe I should have blocked better. Maybe I should have shown up to practice more. Maybe I should have done this, that, and the other for football, whatever. Ball State took nothing for granted. And every once in a while, and I don't want to call too many people out, but Buffalo, it just looked like sometimes like when things just did not go their way, they were like, well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it was just it's a body language thing, but body language is everything.
We both pointed it out to each other. We saw it. It was there. And it's it can be a lazy talking point if you don't know what to look for. If you don't watch as many sports as we, subject ourselves to. But you saw it very, very obviously. There were third down stops where they were going to go for it on fourth down, and Buffalo looked defeated before they ever even chose their play to run. And Ball State, I mean, they aren't like Hype Squad USA, but those are the guys, big play coming off the field. They're taking team pictures with everybody, like doing the pose for every big play, big moment, hyping each other up through the game. Every big moment is a thing. If something bad happens, they aren't dejected and down. And it's the easiest thing to want your team to do, but if you don't have the culture, it's not the easiest thing to teach. And it's not even to say that Buffalo doesn't have that in its culture. It's just that Ball State was that team tonight. They were up. They were up the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% with you. Yeah, I have nothing bad to say about the Buffalo culture either. Like I'm with you there because
Oh
the
no,
Buffalo's culture, is why they've been so successful in the MAC East in winning, two of the last three divisional titles there. But for whatever reason, they just haven't sealed the deal in the two trips to Detroit that it's had, and now it's
yeah,
just okay, then what's the problem? Like what's going on? Like what's holding Buffalo back ultimately? And like Lance Leipold what's isn't the problem. Like he's been a very big part of the solution.
yeah.
So I don't want to like start, automatically pointing fingers like that because it just wouldn't be fair to anybody in this scenario. But it is very telling. It's very telling that Buffalo could have the kind of season it did, have the success that it did, have the pedigree that it did, have the talent that it does, and to just I don't know, just get beat by a team that just weren't expecting. You just weren't expecting this kind of season out of out of Ball State, and I on one half I'm just like puzzled at like how Buffalo had this kind of result, but I'm just like I've been following this league for so long and like been such a fan of the way that Mike New and everybody at Ball State has been building up to this moment where I got to look at the other side a little bit more and just kind of be proud of the work that they've done. I think that's kind of where I'm at. Like I shouldn't be worried about, why Buffalo was bad. I should be more worried about why Ball State's good. I think
Yeah.
that's what we should be talking about after this.
And I will say that, so in my time when I worked as the DeKalb beat writer or the NIU beat writer for the DeKalb Daily Chronicle, these teams, if we're talking about Ball State and Buffalo, for a long time about what Buffalo was capable of and how much we liked what Lance Leipold's done. And as far as New goes, I think Alex always appreciated what New did more than I did, because even though I was aware that Ball State had talent, I didn't think they were capable of this. I think Alex always had an idea of what maybe they were a little bit more capable of doing and had more respect for what Mike New has done. And I say this as somebody who met New face to face, asked him some questions for an interview, and came away like, I really like that guy. Like with Leipold, too. I walked up to him, interviewed him for a thing about NIU offensive line coach Daryl Agpalsa and how good Buffalo's offensive line had been in that 2018 season. They, as good as they were in 2018, they still weren't as good as they were in 2020. And I just walked away from that interview, and right before I left, I was like, I really respect what you've done with this Buffalo program and how far you guys have come. It might sound unprofessional, but like just given what I used to watch with Buffalo football compared to now, I really respect what you guys have done.
Mm.
So like, I'm looking forward to seeing the type of success you guys have this year. God, they were fun to watch this year.
You kind of look at, how they have to build their programs. They don't like Ball State and Muncie, Indiana, Buffalo and Buffalo, New York. Those aren't exactly hotbeds of, recruiting talent. They have to put in a lot of work, not only to find guys that, will go to those schools at their respective dark times, right? Because they didn't get hired into easy situations. Oh, no, 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 no. Like they had very hard jobs, and they still have hard jobs to do. Don't get me wrong. Like a championship appearance or a championship, trophy, it doesn't seal the job for either of them. Like their jobs are still way hard to pull off, and we're gonna keep seeing like the high intensity and like the togetherness from both sides and both their programs. After this, it's gonna feature some new names. It's not gonna feature Jaret Patterson anymore. It's not going to feature Drew Plitt anymore, but it's going to somewhat feel the same because the coaches are going to try to keep it the same. They're not going to, keep relying on, oh, we're just going to pluck all the talent out of Detroit, out of Chicago, out of Florida.
Yeah.
They're not going to keep getting all the 3 stars as much as, they did have good recruiting classes. Don't get me wrong, but those aren't forever. Those were just the 2020 and 2011 signing classes. We have to keep seeing how good of a job these guys can do at developing all these players around all these different positions, year in and year out. But for now, it was nice to see that they were able to build both their programs up from very hard beginnings to really competitive senior classes, and they've had, both these schools have had competitive senior classes before,
Mhm.
but the senior classes at Ball State right now and the senior classes in Buffalo right now are classes that we haven't seen out of those two schools in this league in quite some time, and that in itself is really something. And so for all the talent that we were able to see, we were able to see all of it because of the coronavirus this year. I'm taking none of what I watched for granted because that shit was awesome. Everything they did, no matter, where they fell short today from either side or whatever. And if either of these teams fall short in bowl season, if they make it there, if they want to play, whatever we saw the last 6 weeks and whatever we saw tonight was awesome. It was worth the wait. And some of it sucked, but to me, it was a little bit worth the wait. And I'm really happy that I saw all of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
It sucked that I had to stay home and watch it all instead of going to Rynearson or going to Detroit because I didn't want to be an unknown carrier and just pass it around to someone in press row and have them drive back to Muncie, Indiana and screw up their family Christmas. That would be really crappy, and I couldn't live with myself if I had never known that I did that. But still, I'm here and I enjoyed it.
I'm here and I enjoyed it, and that's what happens when you watch MAC football. And that we're looking at an uncertain couple of weeks ahead as we kind of hope things get better, on a worldwide scale, especially in the country we live in, and that things get better, that sports are able to get back on, and our interest of sports are able to get back and running in a more effective and functional way, in a more safe way. There's going to be a lot of athletes that we're not going to hear from years till now that are going to have health issues, and it really sucks to think about, but it's hard to highlight them until something has happened. Yeah. So I'm still trying to take the positives, and I'm still trying to be grateful that what stuff that happened this season happened. But I also know that there's a lot uncertain about the moment we're in right now. There's a lot of players who have a future to consider as far as, whether they're going pro, whether they're going to come back for another year, whether they've got the degree and they're like, it's not for me. I do know that these two teams are really well stationed to continue to be successful, no matter the uncertainty that we're still going to continue to face in the next couple months, the next year or so. So in a lot of ways, still grateful that things have worked out in some ways in terms of MAC football. Still very frustrated and upset that things have continued to be bad for a lot of people and a lot of athletes, obviously, that we've paid attention to. Mm-hmm. I'm going to continue to try and take the good over the bad wherever I can. But for this, I'm grateful. For the type of stuff we've gotten to see this season, I am still grateful.
Caleb, just before we scoot out, I just want to point out a couple names just in case we didn't already go over their, just officially go over their numbers or whatever. Jimmy Daw, he's our MVP, right? Can we just start by saying that?
I think that's fair, yeah.
I mean, a block punt, the first sack against Buffalo all
year.
Field
goal, yeah.
And the forced fumble to give Christian Albright that touchdown. I think he kind of deserves it. 7 total tackles, 3 for loss. And like I said, the superlatives. Brandon Martin had, he led the game, with 13 tackles. And Uzo Dinma with 10. Jaret Patterson, he had an interception for Buffalo. Was he the only one were there any other turnovers?
You had Antonio Phillips for Ball State, but nobody else for Buffalo.
Yeah. That sucks. Jaret Patterson, the name that we all knew going in, he finished the game with 47 yards.
Wow.
47 yards. That's 2.6 per. Had a touchdown. Kevin Marks had a touchdown, but outside of his incredibly long was it was a 67-yarder. Didn't do too much. I mean, Buffalo had to throw the ball at some point. Antonio Nunn had a career day, 13 catches, 182 yards. Trevor Wilson, like we said, he had that touchdown score earlier, and he did good. But Kyle Van Treese is probably the MVP of the offense because he was tasked with doing the much. Completed 69% of his throws.
Nice.
365 yards, 29 of 42. But you know what? One of my favorite plays that I just want to point out, and I think this is probably the last thing. This is the last thing I really need to say before we head out. Um, Justin Hall, like I said, he was the one guy I was rooting for, like specifically. And so I do want to say congratulations to Justin Hall and to Justin Hall only, especially in the first half when I'm gonna rewatch it and I'm kind of rewatching it right now as we record, but I gotta find it. The play where he stiff armed the fuck out of some dude's soul. Do you remember that play in the first half?
Yes.
That shit was awesome. And I stood up and I said, congratulations, you're going to win a MAC championship. I didn't say that. But, oh my God, I was so happy. I was so happy to see that.
There's so many players on Ball State that you're just like, you know what? I'm very happy that they won a MAC championship. I'm looking at Mike New. I'm like, I'm happy they won a championship. I'm looking at my friend. I have friends who went to Ball State. I just generally for myself to be really happy seeing the reactions of Ball State fans on social during this game tonight and seeing the way that their players, their fans, their alums tweeted about this game, seeing the way they reacted and the way they were in this game and the way they played and the way they acted throughout the season. Super fun team. They made everything fun to watch this year. So shouts to them.